Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, we're going to be doing some more anime talk. I have been talking about anime a lot on this channel, and that conversation is going to continue, but this is a bit more of one for the beginners. These are going to be my recommended anime movies and series for people who are not into the genre or the format, whatever you want to call it, but have been curious about it, and it's, overwhelming to figure out what you might want to start with. So I want to give my recommendations for what I think would be good ones, whether it is a movie or a series to go in and jump in with. So let's get ready. Let's jump in. So first things first, I want to share what kicked it off for me and some of the first series that I started watching and that got me into the format. The first one is technically a cheat, but everyone kind of mentions it and says that it's a good one to start with, and I definitely agree with it, and that's going to be Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, this is technically not an anime. It was produced in the United States, and to be categorized officially as anime, it needs to be made and produced in Japan. But nonetheless, this was heavily inspired by anime, and is still a really great way to kind of get interested in the genre, the format, as, it follows the animation style, or is at least heavily inspired by the animation style. It uses some of the storytelling methods, some of the tropes that are kind of there within the anime format. So I think it is, despite not being an actual official anime, it's one that a lot of people suggest. And for me, it was kind of my first exposure to that format, aside from, seeing Pokemon on TV and stuff like that growing up. Aside from that, when I was in college was when I really actually got into anime. For me, that started with Attack on Titan, which is still one of my favorite series to this day. And now I'm mentioning these as the ones that kicked it off for me. I don't necessarily recommend probably any of these as your first anime, but for me, this is what I was exposed to first and got me into the format. And then we also have Seven Deadly Sins, which is this is kind of I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of a fantasy, but it's like a dark fantasy. But it doesn't follow a typical fantasy, like medieval type thing, where this is a little bit more of that. And then we also have Sword Art Online, which drew me in with the whole mechanic of being trapped inside of a video game. So those are the first things that I watched and got me into anime to kick things off. So like I said, I don't necessarily recommend any of those as your first one. They're all great series in their own right and have, a special place in my heart, being the first things that got me into the format. But again, not ones necessarily I'd recommend as first. Aside from Avatar, Avatar I think is a good one, even though it's not, officially an anime. So without further ado, let's actually get into my list here. So first things first, I'm just going to go alphabetically, so these aren't in any particular order, but Dr. Stone. This is probably one of my favorite series of all time. I love Dr. Stone. And one of the things I love most about it is that the show is technically educational. The heavy thematic influence of science in this series is, one of its most prominent qualities. And so this is like a post-apocalypse. Everyone has been petrified, but people are starting to get out, and we need to figure out how we need to rebuild society. That's kind of the kickoff for this series. There's a lot of fun characters along the way. It's a huge cast. There's always new characters being added to kind of change the dynamics of the group and stuff like that along the way. So it's one of my personal favorite series. They're on the final season right now, which is season 4, but I just think it's a good first time one because it has, a lot of the stuff that makes anime fun, and it is one of the lighter series that's out there. While it has its darker moments and get more serious at time, overall it's a pretty lighthearted, fun kind of adventure series. And like I said, it makes science fun and interesting, and all the science that they use throughout the series is accurate, real science. So like I said, that adds kind of an educational element to the show. It's not designed to be an educational show, but it is really cool that all of the science that they use in it is real science. So that's pretty cool. So if you're into something like that, I think you would really enjoy that show. Like I said, it's one of my personal favorite series, probably. Then after that, we have Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. This series is absolutely fantastic. This is a good one because it's a little longer than just popping in one season and being done. It's like a 65 episode series, so you got a little bit more to chew on story wise, world building wise. But I mean, as far as the story and the world building go, this is some of the best I've seen in the anime format, and really in any series or world that's been explored. So it's a really great story about brotherhood. There's a lot of exploration on themes to do with war and influence and that kind of stuff. So it's just a really deep series. Some of my favorite characters ever are probably in this series, in the Elric brothers. Mustang is another character that's in there. Is probably one of my favorite anime characters. So it's a bit more on the serious side of things compared to Dr. Stone. It has its fun moments. It has, a sense of humor here and there, but it's overall a very straightforward, really, really well done, really well executed series. Obviously, based on the namesake, alchemy is kind of the name of the game for this series, and it's all explored in a really interesting way. You get to follow these two brothers on this journey where they're basically trying to make up for this huge mistake that they have made and that has cost them dearly. I don't want to spoil anything as far as the overall story goes, but it's a really compelling, really powerful story, and has a really great ending as well. Next, hopping into a couple of movies. I was going to talk about Studio Ghibli here, but I'm just going to mention my personal favorite Ghibli movies. But I think just about any Ghibli movie is a good first dive into anime. And from what I've heard mentioned on a podcast recently that I definitely agree with, Studio Ghibli is kind of the gateway in, where find a Studio Ghibli movie that you like and then just find more of that. And that's a good segue to get yourself into the anime format. So for me personally, my favorite Studio Ghibli movies are Kiki's Delivery Service, which is kind of a coming of age slice of life type story of this young girl who's kind of moving out on her own away from her family and is trying to start a business, as like a witch delivery service basically, which is cool. And then we have My Neighbor Totoro. Both of these really good family friendly ones too. So if you want to get your kids into it, you can do that. Jumping away from the alphabetical nature here, we also have Spirited Away. So many people know Spirited Away, but it's a really fantastic story. Another coming of age story on a bit more of a serious side compared to Kiki's Delivery Service and My Neighbor Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro has its serious moments, but Spirited Away, much more consistent on the serious side of things. But they're all just these amazingly realized worlds, absolutely beautiful animation, and really good, compelling stories as well. So like I said, Studio Ghibli, pretty much just, pick and choose ones based on premise, see what you like, and then go from there and find some more anime that you'd be interested in. Next, another one of my absolute favorite series, and one that I also think is a good kind of kicker to get you into the format. This is one of the first that I watched after the initial series that I checked out, and that's Psycho Pass. So this is the first 2 seasons here. There's, I think, 4 seasons, and then there's like maybe a couple spin-off shows, a few spin-off movies here and there. So the story gets a little convoluted the further down the road you get. But as far as what you would need to watch, you can really just watch the first season and it's great. I personally, my favorites are the first 2 seasons and then Psycho Pass the movie, which is after season 3, but chronologically takes place after season 2. So like I said, it gets a little convoluted as things go, but what I love so much about this series is it's a really cool cyberpunk world, and there's a lot of interesting moral dilemmas that are explored throughout the series. So it takes place in this society. Like I said, it's like cyberpunk-esque, so kind of a Blade Runner type city society world, and you follow this new police officer and then more of a seasoned police officer as she joins the force, and they are basically sent out to capture criminals or would-be criminals before they would commit crimes. So they carry this weapon that basically scans a person, analyzes them and their psychological state to say whether they would be or what likeliness they have to commit a crime in the future. So it kind of deals with that moral dilemma of, is it right to address people and remove them before they would commit crimes, or are you predetermining their fate? So there's a lot of really interesting questions explored throughout. Like I said, the world design is really cool with it being in a cyberpunk world. The characters are really interesting, and the story is really well contained in season 1 and season 2, and then the movie, I think, further add on to it. Like I said, season 1 is about all you really need essentially, but continuing on after that, it does some really good stuff as well that I find really interesting. Next, we have another movie, and that is A Silent Voice. Get that centered there for you. This is one that is a absolute tearjerker emotional ride. So it's a bit of a drama / romance where you follow this boy and girl, you meet them when they're young, and he bullies her because she is a mute, and then time goes on, they grow up, he starts to have some feelings for her and regrets the things that he said to her in the past and the ways he might have affected her. So it gets very deep and emotional, but it explores kind of, the effects of bullying in a really interesting, really genuine and authentic way. And it feels very grounded. So I think it's a really powerful story and one that's really emotionally moving as well. Next, I already talked about Spirited Away, a couple more series, and then one more movie. This is, I think, one of the best initial animes to get into, just because it's such a fun, action-packed adventure, and that is Spy Family. This is the first season here. So far, we have 2 seasons and a movie. The movie's not canon, so it's not a part of the story of the show, but it's just kind of like a spin-off, but it still fits really well, and it's fun to see more of the characters. So this is a really fun setup premise in that you follow Lloyd, Anya, and Yor, and they each have their own secrets that they're keeping from each other that the daughter knows about, but the rest of them do not. So Lloyd is a secret agent, one of the best in the business, all kinds of espionage stuff and whatnot. Yor is an assassin, and neither of them knows the other's secret, but for a mission, he marries her to have a cover of a family, and then they adopt Anya as their daughter. The kicker is Anya is a telepath and can read minds. So she quickly finds out that Lloyd is a secret agent and that she is an assassin. But in an effort to keep her family together, even though it's a fake family, because she actually cares about them, she doesn't tell the secrets and is trying to help both of them to have a successful family. So it's just a really fun, really action-packed, really funny series too. It's one of my favorite kind of comedy series that's on right now. If anything in that premise interests you, I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a really fun ride. Next, last series I want to talk about here, we have Steins Gate. This is one a buddy of mine got me into just a year or so ago, but I think it would be a good, pretty introductory anime at the same time. It starts off a little slow, but it essentially follows the story of this scientist and a group of people that he works with and going to get together, and they create this form of time travel. I won't spoil how they do it or kind of how it works, but I will say, in my opinion, maybe up there with right next to Back to the Future, this is my favorite interpretation or exploration or just version of time travel that I've ever seen. That might even surpass Back to the Future, just because Back to the Future is pretty straightforward. But as far as the depth that they go with exploring time travel here, this is excellent. Now, like I said, the show starts off a little bit slow, but it's giving you a lot of background and context that you need that will then pay off in the second half of the series. It is only a 1-season, 24-episode show, so it's a nice not quick because you can have quick 1-season, 12-episode shows, but it's not too long in that it is one just full season, 24-minute episodes. And like I said, it's some of the best time travel I've ever seen and a really good story with interesting characters as well. Finally, last movie on here, we have Your Name. I've talked about this, I think, a couple of times on the channel. This is probably one that I should put on my top 10 favorite movies of all time list. I've seen it a couple of times now, and every time it impresses me more. And even the first time, I thoroughly loved it. One of the best twists I've ever seen in a movie. Fantastic twist. Not that it's all about the twist, but amazing story, really powerful. You get to follow these 2 students. I think they're about in high school or something like that. And they start body swapping. So it's kind of a body swapping drama comedy. But then it does a lot of other stuff too that, again, I won't spoil because I don't want to spoil anything with the twist here. But they start body swapping randomly here and there, and they start to realize it, get to know each other a little bit. So there's a little bit of a romantic element here as well. It has a couple of weird moments, but overall, it's an amazing story. Absolutely gorgeous animation. One of my favorite animated movies of all time for sure. And like I said, one of the best twists I've ever seen in a movie. It's a very powerful, very emotional story. Not necessarily, like a huge tearjerker, but it's just a very well told, very powerful story. So that's everything I wanted to share as far as what got me into anime about 10 years or so ago, as well as the series that I think would be good recommendations for first time people curious about checking out the format. So let me know if you're someone who is into anime, what other suggestions you would have in the comments for either myself to check out or people to check out as first time experiencing the format. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I will see you in the next one.